The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to The David Pakman Show. Welcome to everyone who is watching live, as we are always live Monday through Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time, including everybody from the We Survive Bush, You Will Survive Obama Facebook page, and the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page. I actually check out both of those pages pretty frequently. We get a lot of great stories from them, so I encourage you to check those out. We're getting pretty close to the election. We are getting down to the wire, I think it is fair to say, but we will get to some of those stories in a little bit. I was looking yesterday at some different stories about Hurricane Sandy and just planning kind of what I think will be probably the last day of coverage that in any way relates to Hurricane Sandy, although I may be wrong. I don't want to be speaking too soon. And I came across an interesting story out of New Haven, Connecticut, that a tree had toppled. A giant oak tree that had stood in the downtown park since 1909. The entire footing came off, and skeletal remains, as well as a cement box, were uncovered below that. And it was kind of known that there was a burial area in the past, although city officials didn't think that there were still active bodies that were buried there, which is quite incredible. And police roped off the area for about 24 hours. They brought in the state medical examiner. They wanted to retrieve the bones. This is, I know that this is just kind of silly stuff, but day before Halloween, you get this hurricane, and all of a sudden in town, at the town square, a tree is ripped off and there's bones inside. I mean, it's quite incredible. Guys, give me a status update of what's going on over there as far as tech and what is and isn't available right now. Some technical issues happening.
I think Natan's having camera issues, but we're good.
Okay.
Good.
So yeah. We have Lewis's camera? Everything's good? We do. That's good. Would this freak you out, or would you just assume because it's the day before Halloween that it's somehow fake and Halloween related?
No, I mean it seems to be real. I don't think it would freak me out. I don't know what to think of it. This could be a pretty old body. I mean, it was under this tree. It could be as old as the tree. It
could be very, very old.
Yeah.
Incredible. Rush Limbaugh, in response to Chris Christie being seen in a positive way, saying President Obama did a good job handling Hurricane Sandy and so on and so forth. Rush Limbaugh's angry. And it's funny because yesterday we talked on the show about how even though it's not a political thing in the sense that President Obama's the president and he should be going to look at damage where damage happened, Governor Chris Christie is the governor of New Jersey, so if they're looking at damage in New Jersey, it makes sense that the governor should be there. Now, the reason it's kind of funny is just months ago at the Republican National Convention, Governor Chris Christie was saying Obama and leadership don't go together. The guy is the furthest thing from a leader, period. And now he's saying President Obama's leadership has been fantastic. Well, Rush Limbaugh didn't like it, and Rush Limbaugh on his show decided to call Governor Christie fat, which he is overweight, but
so is Rush.
But so is Rush Limbaugh. Maybe not now. I'll tell a story about that. And also calling Governor Chris Christie a fool for palling around with President Obama. It is weird, as you say, Lewis, because Rush Limbaugh has been an overweight guy for many parts of his life as well. So it's kind of weird to call someone else fat. I don't know.
It's strange to, not only that, it's strange to slam someone for
someone you presumably like. Which is the most incredible thing.
It's like he'll do anything to make the president look bad, regardless of how ridiculous it is. I mean, what's the governor supposed to do when Obama comes to survey the damage? Say, you know what? Get the hell out of here. I don't want to see it. Right? I mean, what's he going to do?
I have a funny Rush Limbaugh story. The only time I've ever been in the same room as Rush Limbaugh was a couple years ago at this talk radio conference in New York City, where Rush Limbaugh was receiving like the Freedom of Speech Award or something like that. Talk radio conferences, as you can imagine, are pretty right-wing, just simply because of the nature of talk radio. And it was weird because it was like 10 minutes before his speech and Rush wasn't there. And all of a sudden things start getting very, very agitated and people start walking around and saying, we've got to clear this hallway, we've got to clear that hallway. Case in point, what was going on is that Rush Limbaugh was flying in from Florida just for this speech for 10 minutes. And then leaving the venue and going right back to the airport and flying out. I don't know if back to Florida or to some other place that he was going. People were not allowed to talk to Rush. You must not look at Rush. The hallway must be empty, so he can literally come in the side door to the auditorium, give his speech, and then leave. So that was it. That nobody was allowed to speak to Rush or see Rush or remotely come close to talking to Rush Limbaugh. The other interesting thing was he was very, very thin. This was, I don't know what was going on diet-wise or in terms of drugs or anything else, but he was incredibly thin during this event, shockingly so, almost in a way. Not at all reminiscent, certainly, of this picture.
Yeah, that was a while ago, too.
That was probably 3 years ago.
Right.
His weight has fluctuated a lot, as often can happen with people who have
drug problems?
Drug problems, yeah, of a variety of kinds, which we won't go into. We actually have some data now about, well, we had this question: will Hurricane Sandy and the political implications that invariably follow it have any effect on the election? We know that this is an opportunity for President Obama to be in the news in a non-political but still presidential way, and it's a time where Mitt Romney is going to have trouble getting himself into the news. There's a new Washington Post ABC tracking poll which is giving us some numbers, and 77% of those surveyed, presumably representative of the entire country, if you believe that this poll was done in a way that makes sense, 77% say President Obama handled Hurricane Sandy very, very well. Now, Mitt Romney was not really in a position to handle Hurricane Sandy per se, but he did try to kind of inject himself into it by holding this fundraiser, this storm relief event. Even though it was really a planned rally, he just changed the name of it to be a storm relief event, collecting supplies against the Red Cross's own indications that supplies are not what they want, but cash is what they want. And then actually it turned out that the Mitt Romney campaign bought a lot of those supplies that were then donated to themselves, just in case people didn't actually show up with donations. So Romney did kind of inject himself into it, and people didn't like it. 44% thinking that Mitt Romney did well surrounding Hurricane Sandy. I mean, certainly I don't know if the approve of the job he did phraseology is the one that was used, because it doesn't really make sense. But people saying that Romney not doing so well. So could this have an effect? It really could. I mean, it's one of those this is one of those intangibles where you can't control the weather unless you think that either God is sending weather events for specific reasons and you can pray to make him do that, or that Democrats control the weather. Putting all of those conspiracy theories aside, you can't really control the weather. And this is something where now the last image, the last thought a lot of people may have, so-called undecideds, probably more people who were unsure if they would vote at all, right? They might say, well, Obama did really well, and I saw him with that Republican governor, and I think I'm going to vote for Obama. I think that there could be some marginal positive effect here.
Definitely. There could be a positive effect for Obama just by doing his presidential duty, of course. And Romney, what he was doing was strictly for political gain. Of course, had Obama been doing any of this type of thing strictly for political gain, he probably would have gone to a swing state.
Right.
So clearly, I think Obama has the advantage here.
You know what this made me think of? Because this type of national weather events and disasters of all kinds, terrorism events, they bring people together. They bring the country together. People tend to rally around the president, whoever it is, regardless of party. We saw that happen in 2001, didn't we, with George W. Bush? I mean, after George W. Bush gave that speech at Ground Zero after 9/11, he had something like high 80s approval. Now, of course, he went completely off the deep end with his policy in pursuit of war that made no sense based on false pretenses and so on and so forth, destroyed the economy, and ended up somehow getting reelected via 30,000 vote margin in Ohio, even with a sub 50% approval rating, if I remember correctly, or around 50%. But that being said, maybe President Obama will actually be able to push this into some kind of positive sentiment on Tuesday. I don't know. Regardless of its effect, I would rather the hurricane have not happened, regardless of whether it's good or bad for any politician. However, I think it's illogical for us to simply ignore the effect that it might have.
Right. Yeah. It happened, so we can talk about what happened as a result of that.
Polling update. There's a lot of polling information that's coming in. We now have individual polls, only few days now before the election, 5 days before the election. We also have the polling aggregators looking at averages of all the polls. So let's take a look at the two that I think are the most extensive, trustworthy, and detailed. Number one, 538.com. This is Nate Silver's website. 538.com right now has a 79% chance of President Obama winning re-election, 21% chance for Mitt Romney. What does that mean? That means that when you run 100 simulations based on today's polling data, and taking into consideration the variability of swing states and the probabilities in each state that each candidate might carry it, 79 out of those 100 times, a scenario comes up where President Obama is reelected. 21 out of those 100 times, the scenario that comes up gives Mitt Romney reelection. If we look at the electoral vote prediction from Nate Silver, 300 electoral votes predicted for Barack Obama, 237 for Mitt Romney. In Ohio specifically, at this point, it may all come down to Ohio, We'll talk after the election about whether that's really democratic, that it really does end up coming down to one state. 80% chance for President Obama in Ohio, according to Nate Silver on 538.com. A 59% chance for Mitt Romney in Florida. What's your assessment of these numbers?
I'll take it. That's my assessment.
Sam Wong's Princeton Election Consortium, also a fascinating website, election.princeton.edu. The meta margin right now is a plus 2.36% for President Obama. This takes into consideration a number of different factors, including all the polls, and represents the swing that would need to happen towards Mitt Romney to get back to a tie. In other words, Mitt Romney would need to gain, in the aggregate, 2.36% in all polls in order to swing this back towards a tie race.
Right.
That's what the meta margin represents. The electoral vote prediction, 308 for Obama and 230 for Romney. We have right now both Nate Silver and Sam Wong within 7 electoral votes of each other, 7 or 8 electoral votes of each other. A probability from Sam Wong of a 95% re-election for President Obama, he says, 95% probability. Strong numbers for sure.
Definitely.
Now, what about those Republican polls? Rasmussen Reports is sticking to their guns. They are coming out with the latest daily tracking national survey. They say Mitt Romney is beating Barack Obama in the national polls 49 to 47%. We've got drastically different numbers right now from a variety of different pollsters. Looking at the averages, it looks favorable for President Obama. A lot of people are going to have a lot of explaining to do on November 7th, aren't they?
Either way.
No matter what happens.
No matter
That's
what
right.
happens,
There's going to be there are going to be certain parties that will have a lot to explain the day after the election, and I'm curious to see it. We talked a little bit about the criticism that pollster Nate Silver is getting. You know what? I don't even know if calling him a pollster is accurate. He doesn't really do polls. He does analyses of polls that other people are doing.
Right.
But that being said, he's been criticized for a number of reasons. One right-wing blogger earlier this week, one right-wing pollster criticizing Nate Silver for seeming kind of effeminate and gay. Of course, Nate Silver is openly gay, so it was a strange criticism to make. Also strange because what does effeminacy have to do with the validity of your mathematical analyses? I don't know.
Good question.
Not much at all. In any case, Joe Scarborough tweeted out basically saying, anyone that says, he criticized Nate Silver, saying anybody that thinks this race is anything but a toss-up right now is such an ideologue, they're jokes. And he was specifically talking about Nate Silver's website, which shows Mitt Romney has only a basically 1 in 4 chance of becoming president, really now dropping to 1 in 5 based on today's numbers. So Nate Silver came back and he offered a friendly bet, not a $10,000 bet like Mitt Romney, but he tweeted out to Joe at Morning Joe, if you think it's a toss-up, let's bet. If Obama wins, you donate $1,000 to the American Red Cross. If Romney wins, I do. Deal? Nate Silver, 538. No word yet on whether Joe Scarborough has accepted the bet, but certainly putting one's money where their mouth is something. Of course, when Mitt Romney did it during a Republican primary debate, it was a little bit weird, particularly when you just off the cuff bet 10 grand and you're trying to give people the impression that you're not out of touch based on the amount of money you have. But that's kind of another story altogether.
Yeah, someone who was unemployed for the year before that, can they really bet 10 grand?
Yeah, he's unemployed just like everybody else. He made a little bit of money on the side, like $550K off of these random speaking gigs. But he's got no job.
Right.
Today's bonus show is going to be fantastic. We'll talk about a new study. We know that children's political views are often in line with parents' political views. But we have a new study out that says the parenting style may shape political views in a very particular way. So we'll talk about that on the bonus show. We'll talk about Sweden paying some jobless young people to move to Norway and a lot of other stuff. If you're not getting the bonus show, you've got to get it. davidpakman.com/membership. Stay tuned. Plenty more after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Today's David Pakman Show Member of the Day is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. In a free society, people would get to vote on which facts are true, right? I mean, unfortunately, we live in a society where facts suffer from liberal bias. You can find out more about that at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day, Robert Ragland. Welcome to Robert. Thank you very, very much for being a David Pakman Show member. People may or may not know, membership is our top funding source. We had just, because it is November 1st, I'll mention, we had almost the best new membership month in history in October of 2012, just last month, not quite there. I'm hoping that November of 2012 will be the new month with the most new members. So let's get off to a good start.
We can only hope, Dave.
DavidPakman.com/membership. Thanks to all David Pakman Show members, including today's member of the day, Robert Ragland. Remember all that stuff Republicans have been saying about rape over the last 20 years and how crazy it is?
Yes.
How could you forget? We now have a new one. Republican candidate John Koster is now referring to the rape thing. In other words, it's not even rape, it's the rape thing. Now, I want to issue a warning. This audio I'm about to play is incredibly disturbing if you believe women should have any control over their bodies. So if you fall into that category, be aware you may be disturbed by the audio we're about to play. This was John Koster asked about the devastating consequences that this no abortion, even in cases of rape, could have for people. He had a number of things to say. Let's take a listen.
I wanted to know, is there any time that you would agree with abortion? I mean,
when a mother's life is in danger, I'm not going to make that decision.
Yeah.
You know, I know they go on. Incest is so rare. I mean, it's so rare. But the rape thing.
The rape thing?
You know, I know a woman who was raped and kept her child, gave it up for adoption, and she doesn't regret it. In fact, she's a big pro-life proponent.
Let's stop it there for a second and then go back to it. This is funny because we did a Republican rape compilation video on YouTube where we have the Todd Akin legitimate rape comment, we have the Ron Paul honest rape comment, we have the Murdoch God-given rape comment, and there's another comment in there, and I forget who it's from, about a guy saying, listen, I know someone who had an experience similar to rape, and they didn't have an abortion and everything's fine. And when they were pressed, well, what do you mean it was similar to rape? He said, well, someone I know had a child out of wedlock. And then he actually had to say, well, I mean, it's not exactly the same as rape. This rape thing reference and this I know one person who did something else, it's all part of really minimizing what rape is. And we can't be confused when we hear someone like Koster say, I know one person who they kept the child and gave it up for adoption and she doesn't regret it. This anecdotal stuff is really essentially worthless for a discussion of policy. It's great she did that, and she still would have been able to do that with pro-choice policy. The problem is with pro-life, so-called pro-life policy, a lot of women wouldn't have a choice.
And that they're basing their entire debate on this one anecdote is insane. Of course, if one of them were to have their wife or daughter impregnated by a rapist, I guarantee you it would be a completely different story.
Let's get a little more of the audio, and he's going to refer to the rape thing again.
But on the rape thing, it's like, how does putting more violence onto a woman's body and taking the life of an innocent child that's a consequence of this crime, how does that make it better? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but she has to live with
Flawless logic there from John Koster. So we've now updated. Remember, Natan, you can take my screen on this, I think. Remember this picture that we had of, let's see if I can get a better view of that. The Republican rape advisory chart, where it's almost like a terrorism advisory, where it goes from enjoyable rape all the way up to gift from God rape. I've taken the liberty of changing the very top of it. So now it's the Republican Party rape thing advisory. I think it's more fitting, right? It's kind of the final, it's the cherry on top, so to speak. It's not really rape. It's this rape thing. It's kind of nebulous, you know. Does it exist or not? I mean, if it were a real thing, we wouldn't call it a rape thing. We would just say it's rape.
There's a lot of speculation on the matter.
A lot of speculation, exactly. We just don't know. It's the jury is still out on this rape thing. There's just not enough evidence. Mm-hmm. Just like on climate change.
Right.
Or common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Arizona Attorney General Tom Horne is a guy who is a very, very big believer in the sanctity of marriage. Now, for Tom Horne, part of the sanctity of marriage is that it really should be reserved for one man and one woman. It should not be the type of thing that two men could get married regardless of how long they've been together, or two women should get married. None of that stuff should happen. Why, Lewis? because marriage is sacred, as you know.
Sacred.
Now, it turns out that Tom Horn has now been exposed as an adulterer. So marriage is, of course, very, very sacred, just apparently not his marriage to him.
Please continue.
Yeah. Tom Horn caused more than $1,000 worth of damage the other day when he clipped a car in a parking garage and then drove off, in order, according to FBI agents, to conceal an affair that he was having with his passenger. Phoenix police records obtained Tuesday include detailed witness accounts by FBI agents who had been following him on March 27th as part of a campaign finance investigation. They say they watched him back his borrowed vehicle into a white Range Rover in a parking garage. FBI agents said after the fender bender, Horn and the woman, now identified as Carmen Chinal, who works for Horn, walked off and entered the residential area of the complex where Chinal lives. In August, Horn filed a lawsuit with the U.S. Supreme Court demanding that Arizona be allowed to repeal domestic partners insurance for state employees. Of course, sanctity of marriage. The guilty dog barks the loudest, doesn't he?
Always.
It's amazing to me because when we talk about sanctity of marriage, right, Kim Kardashian can have a 72-day or 72-hour, I don't even remember how long it was, marriage, and then she's allowed to get married again and again and again as many times as she wants. Sanctity of marriage. Lesbian couple, been together 20 years. In a lot of states, they can't get married. We must protect, Lewis, the sanctity of marriage. The Menendez brothers, remember the brothers who killed their parents and are in jail? They can get married. They can get married, and even though they're in jail, they killed their own parents. Loving gay couple who has been together for 25 years, 10 years, 5 years, however long. A lot of states, they can't get married. In fact, they can even get fired for being gay in a lot of states. We must protect the sanctity of marriage, Lewis. It is of huge importance.
Of course, this isn't the first story like this we've done. There are so many hypocrites
I wish it
out
were.
there. Yeah, when it comes to sanctity of marriage.
The other day, yesterday actually, I turned on MSNBC. Usually before coming into work, right before or after I have lunch, I'll turn on 5 minutes of MSNBC, 5 minutes of Fox News, 5 minutes of CNN. I turned on and I saw this video of a Mitt Romney rally in Tampa, Florida. Take a look at this.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, so as I was watching it, I noticed something a little bit weird, which is that the ratio of minorities on the stage in view of the camera seemed very, very high relative both to the number of minorities in this country and particularly in relation to the number of minorities who support Mitt Romney's candidacy for president. So I pulled this, and what we did here is we put a red circle around everybody who appears to be, sometimes it's hard to tell. Like, for example, according to the U.S. Census, I'm Hispanic, but seeing me in a crowd, you probably wouldn't assume that. So we don't really know exactly, but we're taking an overview of people who appear to be Asian, Black, or Hispanic. And I counted that there were 9 people here out of the 36 that are at least partially visible on the stage. So, out of the 25 people, which gives us about 36% of the stage has been made up of minorities, as you can see, Lewis. And there certainly may be more. I mean, this woman over here in the upper left corner, I think that there's a very good chance she may be Hispanic. I'm not really sure. Because there's doubt, we didn't circle her.
The other funny thing about this is if you're not a minority, you're a woman.
Oh, of course, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Look at what Mitt Romney's, that's actually brilliant. I didn't even think of that. Mitt Romney's depending on the white male vote to win this election. How many white men are on that stage? I see one guy in the very last row.
Right.
And he's basically covered up.
Right. It's all women and minorities.
So again, projection and bizarro world. Mitt Romney's actual constituency, the exact opposite of what this very carefully crafted stage presence represents. What's your thought on this, Natan?
My thought is, if you look at the facts, we already know what the facts are. Over 65% of Hispanics are going to vote for Obama, over 90% of blacks, more than 50% of women. So this is a last-ditch effort to get them, and we'll see on Tuesday whether it worked.
All 3 black men in Florida who will be voting for Mitt Romney are on the stage right now in this picture. It's shocking.
Brilliant.
You got to love it. I mean, it's just, it's electioneering at its best, isn't it?
It's politics at its best.
Argentina, my home country, has lowered the voting age from 18 to 16. This is a change that could help the now politically ailing president, Cristina Kirchner. court the youth vote ahead of the 2013 midterm elections. Now, a bunch of opposition members walked out of the lower house of Congress after a crazy late-night session last night. I encourage you to check out the video of it. This eventually did win approval, 131 to 2. So there's a couple of different thoughts here, right? I mean, skeptics are saying that this is really to drum up young person support, especially when there are people that are currently too young to vote but might support the president in the next election. Get them excited about voting, make the pie bigger, so to speak. As opposed to getting more of the pie, make the pie bigger. The popularity level has fallen for her below 25% in the midst of economic issues and slowing demand from Brazil, which is the top trade partner, high inflation. We can't even get accurate numbers about what is inflation. What's your reaction to this move, Natan?
Well, it's interesting. Right before the show started, I was watching a TED Talk by Sam Wong, who recently, you mentioned him as the head of the Princeton Election Consortium predicting the election. But he's actually a neuroscientist, and his talk was about executive functioning and willpower. And he said very clearly the evidence shows that the prefrontal cortex is not completely grown to its mature state until the 20s. So until you're in your mid-20s. So
this brings up a number of questions. Is a 17-year-old voting really someone that we can say is developmentally at a stage where voting makes sense?
Well, I think the problem is when you're not allowed to serve in the military or drive a car, it seems kind of difficult to presume that you can accurately vote for president.
That's exactly the thing. And that brings up questions in the U.S. as well, which is really if your brain is not fully formed until the early 20s, why are you allowed to get into the military at 18 or even younger in the U.S. with parental permission, a permission slip, so to speak? A lot of questions, but this is very interesting.
Yes, I feel we might have to reenact the draft if, let's say, you had to be 22 to get into the military.
A couple of side notes. Voting is mandatory in Argentina for those 18 to 70. It would be discretionary for 16 and 17-year-olds. Also, no alcohol sales in Argentina on Election Day. And we happened to be there on vacation, Natan and I, this past few months ago during Election Day. And there were a bunch of funny incidents with people trying to buy alcohol, claiming, well, no, I already voted. Well, don't you have the slip? No, well, I didn't keep the slip. I threw the slip out. Why would I have it? A lot of funny stuff goes on. People trying to buy their wine on Election Day there. But that may be a story for a different day. Let's take a break. Coming up next, Dennis Campbell. Also, we'll talk about a 160-inch Obama sign in Michigan that is really angering some Republicans. Stay tuned. A lot more still to come.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It is Thursday, time for Worldview with Dennis Campbell. Dennis is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine, author of the book Billionaire Boys Election Freak Show, and also Egypt Unshackled. Earlier in the week, Dennis, we had Hurricane Sandy come through here, and there were a lot of political implications, including now the discussion of Chris Christie being seen with President Obama and what that means just days before the presidential election. And we've really not seen much of a connection being made to discussions of climate change. Not that individual extreme weather events are the lone indicator of climate change, but you would think it would create an opportunity to discuss that. Mainstream media not too interested in touching it. Talk a little bit about, on your side of the pond, what is the connection between individual weather events and climate change and the discussion that these topics get in their mainstream media?
Well, it is a very big issue here. What a lot of people don't recognize is that when you look at a map of the United Kingdom and look at it on an actual globe and draw across the latitude lines, you will see that we are on a direct line with Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Now, obviously, we don't get the cold temperatures that they're known for because of one simple factor. The Gulf Stream, which hugs the U.S. East Coast, empties out right here over Ireland and Great Britain and pretty much the whole northern part of the sea area there, the North Sea. What we do have is a renewed focus on it because we've been having also very, very strange weather events. Just before you and I started recording this segment, David, we had a line of supercells come through, and I can track them on the Met Office's radar as they roll across. It must have been moving at a good clip, about 40 to 45 miles per hour, and they looked everything like some of the storms that you would get racing across the Great Plains, as well as what you would see come through in a typical afternoon in Miami and Florida. And what I see to be extraordinarily shocking is the amount of moisture that is contained in these storms. We had 3 straight days of rain at the end of September, and each of those days contained 1 month's typical rainfall for this time of year. So it's becoming a big issue, and one that we're starting to focus on very carefully here in this part of the world.
All right, now the obvious question that has to be asked here is, well, let's take a step back for a second and say we've really got reliable, observable weather for a couple of hundred years of records, more or less. And given how long the Earth has been around, it is very presumptuous to say that because of any individual weather events, even in a 25, 50, 100-year period, that we are seeing actual climate change in the long term. Now, I understand that point of view. How is that used on your side? I mean, here in the U.S., that idea is used basically to say this is a liberal conspiracy and we should absolutely not worry about it at all. Now, to me, all it says is we need to be aware of that, but we also need to be taking it very, very seriously. How is it seen there?
Well, there's definitely an impact on the amount of carbon that is being put into the air. We're seeing record low polar ice caps. We're seeing tremendous amounts of storms, much like what we saw with Sandy. Yes, in one respect, it is too early to say that climate change has caused all that we have seen. On the other hand, there is clearly a man-made footprint to all of this. We used to see temperatures routinely in the 80s and 90s in Italy. Now those temperatures in Italy and again in Greece are well over 100 to 110 to 115 degrees. And what's happened is that those countries have become almost desert-like and arid in their nature, whereas here, where we normally would have temperatures in the 60s and 70s, maybe high of 80 to 85, we're seeing much more temperate temperatures here in the summer months. So there are some changes going on systemically. We're seeing insects here coming up from parts of Africa, parts of Southern Europe that we've never seen before. We're seeing diseases being spread in a way, and particularly when you start talking, you know, the travels from sub-Saharan Africa on up through across the Mediterranean and into Europe, there are going to be some fairly dramatic changes in the coming years.
In the U.S., even though the overwhelming consensus looking at the numbers is that we do have to be aware that human activity on Earth is or may be affecting climate, there are these kind of holdout scientists. Often they are funded by groups that have an interest in having a counterpoint, but it doesn't really filter down in this kind of 99 to 1% ratio to popular opinion. In other words, popular opinion is much more split about what the effect of human activity is on the climate. Compare that to Europe. I mean, in Europe, are people more confident that this is a real thing, or address that a little bit?
Well, in Europe, we believe in science. I mean, you know, I literally had a dinner last Friday evening with a number of professors at the University of Cardiff who were all saying that if Mitt Romney were to become elected as a result of this campaign, the U.S. will see a phenomenal brain drain of scientific talent. People are not going to stick around because there's not going to be any funding available for the research grants that's required. I mean, you saw with the floods at the hospital there in New York City, you know, literally years worth of research were completely destroyed because they didn't even have things such as simple medical records on computer systems and backups. So the fact that we believe in science and that we don't have a bunch of creationist yahoos writing our school textbooks is a huge advantage here. And I think you're going to see more and more American scientists get fed up with the system and the way in which people are literally being brainwashed into this way of thinking. They're going to be coming over here. They're going to be going to Asia, where they'll be welcomed with open arms because there are a number of huge things to be resolved. Illnesses, diseases, things that you know require stem cells and other sorts of things that you can't even touch because there's such white-hot social issues on your side of the pond.
All right, very quickly, Dennis, I do want to touch on last week's story, which we did, where you broke the story of the retired NSA analyst who pointed out what he believes to be mathematical proof that Republican election fraud is taking place. Give us a follow-up. Of course, the video and the story doing very, very well over the last 7 days. What's going on now with that?
Well, we're going to put an update story out either tomorrow or first thing Saturday morning. What I have witnessed, and again, going back to this idea of science and math being so important, if I look at what Michael Donahoe and Francois Choquette and Parker have done, I mean, I am included on their email strings of messages going back and forth. And what I like most about the way in which they're going about this is that they're constantly testing assumptions. They're constantly bouncing things off of each other. And they're saying, we don't have a definitive answer here or there, but there's very likely evidence that there's something going on that needs to be paid attention to. There's been another study, and another group of scientists have joined in from Stanford University into the discussion. And we also have the hacker group Anonymous expressing interest in the results, who were involved, the companies, etc. So this story is something that's going to continue right on up till Tuesday, and I think beyond Tuesday, because you're going to have some real difficulties with the actual counting of ballots, and who knows when we're going to get this actually resolved.
All right, so Stanford and Anonymous now involved, certainly covering all bases. We've been speaking
individual
with,
scientists from those schools, not the schools themselves.
We've been speaking with Dennis Campbell. He is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine, the book Egypt Unshackled, the book Billionaire Boys Election Freak Show. Dennis, thanks as always.
Pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Please support strong independent media like The David Pakman Show by subscribing at davidpakman.com/membership. We would appreciate it. A guy in Hamburg Township, Michigan, has put up a 160-inch screen. It's a digital screen. It's basically a digital Obama sign. His name is Sean Haney, and he put this thing together, and it has different messages, including one that says Mitt Romney tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas. Republicans don't like it. Okay, so this initially happened because he kept getting his yard signs stolen or vandalized. So he said, I'm going to put up what's essentially almost like a billboard here. And the township government sent in the big guns. We actually have the voicemail that Sean Haney received from an individual named Pat Hagman with the Hamburg Township saying, listen, you really got to take that thing down because it's, I don't know, it's kind of disturbing people. Take a listen to the voicemail he got.
Hello, Sean. My name is Pat Hagman. I'm with Hamburg Township. I was just trying to get in touch with you regarding your projector screen. And it's causing quite a bit of havoc in terms of the distraction that it's causing for traffic.
Right.
It does raise some concerns. I'd like to speak with you about it. I do understand you're right for your having a political sign in your yard, but I do have some concerns for safety.
Yeah.
So, because there is some movement on that sign and it's not static. So please give me a call. I don't want to see anybody get hurt or any accidents.
All right. So then he goes on to give his number, so we'll cut that part. So this is really funny. So at this point, the Hamburg Township sign ordinance, I was not able to find, and a couple of bloggers who wrote about this were also not able to find it. So Sean Haney ended up speaking to this Pat Hagman, who wanted him to take the sign down or do whatever, and he wrote the following. The guy backed down. I didn't agree to any changes. He said moving signs are a violation. I asked him, what about the one used by the fire department or another one used by a local school? He said, listen, I can't make you do anything about it. I just don't want people to get into an accident. And I said, hey, I just don't want people to vote for Mitt Romney. And then he says, I also asked him to slow down the traffic on the road if he's really concerned for safety, which of course would make it so people see his sign for a slightly longer period of time.
Right.
I love this stuff. Now, it is true that there may be, in some places, this type of sign would be illegal. In other words, there would be a sign ordinance about the size or whatever. It just doesn't appear that it was the case here, and Republicans really not liking the fact that he has these really well done signs that are anti-Romney signs.
Right, yeah, it's pretty huge, too. Really taking it to the next level.
Free Press is reporting on some experimental election software patches that have been installed in some Ohio voting machines. Why is this happening time and time again? tag Romney is connected to the Ohio voting machines. There's questions about the voting machines being out of calibration and voting for the wrong person. Now it turns out that during the 2004 election, this is a previous Free Press report, it was reported that election officials actually installed some uncertified and untested software patches on voting machines in 44 Ohio counties. Now, why is it important that these are considered experimental? Well, if they're considered experimental, the requirements for confirming that they will not affect or skew or distort the behavior of the machine doesn't have to be there. In other words, because it's experimental, it's like a beta test. You know, all bets are off. Now, these are still installed. There's a number of these voting machines that are still going to be using these experimental patches, okay? Now, Free Press started requesting the public records from all 88 Ohio counties to have a database of what voting machines are there, what equipment is being used. Now, they've been basically able to get that information. Unfortunately, the Ohio Secretary of State has not complied with requests for lists of equipment, contracts, schedules of payment, the identities of the vendors, so on and so forth, basically just being flatly ignored. So we just don't know where exactly are these experimental patches installed, what effect will they have. We just don't know. What we do know is that there are experimental software patches on some of these voting machines. Yet another question about will the vote be counted accurately.
Right. Amazing. Testing software during the presidential election. Testing it.
Why not?
Unreal.
All right, let's get to some voicemails. I'll get through as many of these as I can. Our voicemail line is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is one on the Supreme Court. Let's take a listen.
Hey, David. My name is Tara. I'm from Mendocino County in California. I've been watching your show maybe a month or two, and I also watched the Young Turks, Tom Hartman, and Amy Goodman. And I have to say, I was screaming at my TV last night when you had Tink on, and you were discussing all the many ways that, much as we don't like Obama and many of the things he's done, how Romney would be worse. And Cenk was saying, not to mention this, not to mention that. And I am screaming at the TV, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court. And finally, kind of as an afterthought, Cenk said, not to mention the Supreme Court.
Okay, so that is true. We've been talking, it wasn't a big part of that interview, Tara, you're absolutely right about that. However, we have talked about it extensively. We had an interview with Adam Winkler exclusively to talk about what would the different Supreme Court likely outcomes be depending on who is elected. So I think it's a huge issue, maybe one of the biggest in terms of the two candidates, and we have covered it.
We did get into that, yes.
Just not in that interview. Okay, let's get on to another voicemail. Here's one from the Eggman about the hurricane.
How much do you want to bet that the cleanup for Hurricane Sandy is going to be 1,000,000 times quicker than the cleanup for Hurricane Katrina? I'm sure you've already addressed this, that when a bunch of rich, white, Jewish people or East Coast people get destroyed, they get cleaned up a lot quicker than some poor, black, Southern, Catholic Christians, whatever they are down there, you know, voodoo lovers, whatever. Shalom, guys. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, so Eggman making a point that we still have to remember what we have to discuss. What was the racial component? You know, there's a number of different conspiracy theories surrounding the race of people affected by Hurricane Katrina. I don't jump into any conspiracy theories, but I will say that depending on what parts of the country are affected and the socioeconomic status of people, there are differences in how different things are dealt with. I would go that far.
Yeah, also now we have a more competent FEMA director and a more competent president, so that helps. So
we can't underestimate that. Absolutely, Louis. Very, very good point. Here is a voicemail regarding the potential slowdown of cancer cures. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, David, this is Juan from Northridge, California. I am calling regarding the segment that you had on the cure for cancer. And I think that the issue is even much more profound than that. You alluded to the fact that you don't frequent fast food restaurants and stuff like that. And I think the day before you had mentioned about this individual who went to die at this Greek island. And I think that when we look at those two factors combined, we realize that the cure for cancer is much more than a cure. It's just a lifestyle and a mindset.
Very, very good point. We know that a lot of cancers are environmental, behavioral as well. We can't ignore the idea that lifestyle and diet play a huge role, no question about it. But that being said, that's a separate issue from actual cures per se. So
right. I believe diet is one of probably the biggest factor when it comes to cancer.
Huge factor. Great voicemail. Keep them coming. 219-2-DAVID-P. 2 more shows before the 2012 presidential election. We'll talk to you on Monday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.